concludes our question and answer portion of tonight's forum. We'll end with the candidates having 3 minutes to give their closing remarks. And I mean 3 minutes because you're going to make me lose my reputation around here being bossy. You see the timekeepers eyeballing me. Okay, so 3 minutes. And we're going to start with you, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you. And thank you so much for putting this forum on. You were marvelous tonight.
Thank you.
I was at a meeting earlier today, and I asked a question, and it was to a room of over 100 senior people, and I said, how many of you think there's voter fraud in Minnesota? 100% raised their hand. That's a problem. When the people of Minnesota think there's fraud in the system, then they start to question whether it's even worth going to the polls. Now, it's been said here that Minnesota is 9 out of 9. Well, when you take a look at 2008, Frank and Coleman recount, 78%. Next election process, 55%. It has not come up above that 2008, even though the population has increased. We run the risk, if we do not have integrity in our election system, of disenfranchising the voters simply because they think that it's not fair and that their vote is going to get canceled out. So I think the primary responsibility for the Secretary of State is to re-engage in the public arena and say, you know what, we are doing all we can to ensure that if you do the hard work to determine who you're voting for, that vote counts one vote. And that means closing some of the loopholes that we've talked about tonight. I'm not about disenfranchising anybody. I think everybody should have the opportunity who is eligible to vote, and we need to make it as easy as possible to make that happen. But I also think some of the things we've outlined tonight about getting into those communities that are finding it difficult to engage in our culture in America, and making sure that they feel comfortable with that, and then pulling them into the system is another very important part of this process, and one that I look forward to engaging in. I want to thank you so much for coming tonight, listening to what typically would be kind of, what does a Secretary of State do? Follow the governor around and take notes? So it's kind of one of those deals that I'm very encouraged to see that you're willing to engage in this process. You can find out more information about me and the campaign. You can go to danseverson.com. And again, I've got that first 100 days. That's my commitment to the voters of Minnesota. That will be my action taken as soon as I step into that office. And I'm passionate about a lot of things. But as I said in my opening statement, it's about protecting our Constitution. It's about protecting the rule of law. It's about protecting your rights and your security at the polling place. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Mr. Helen, would you like to proceed?
Thank you, Felicia. Thanks to the Jefferson Center. Thanks to the Helen Center for having me. This has been great. I love these opportunities to reach a lot of people, as much as I love an opportunity to speak one-on-one. I'm going to be sticking around a while. I've got more information. You can ask me your questions direct if you didn't have a chance to afterwards. And there's also some t-shirts out there where we're getting the message out. This is a very challenging thing to do, to run for a political office. And it's very challenging to do it in a race that people are largely unfamiliar with. And it's hard to do it as a young third-party candidate. But we're looking forward to the next 28 days waking up with your images in my brain. So I'm excited. We're gonna take the fight to them. It is a fight. Politics is a place where you've really got to stand up. You've got to be fearless. You've got to represent your true, honest self. And that's what I can do. I've heard today that our next Secretary of State needs to be nonpartisan. By show of hands, did everyone here know about the Independence Party before I came that for a major party in the state? A couple didn't. That's something that we need to get out. You have options on the ballot. So I'm an option that I want you to consider. And that's why I'm here. And in terms of nonpartisanship, I don't see bipartisanship as being the same as nonpartisan, because that leaves out all of the independents, the disaffected, the people that didn't want to participate or didn't want to be a part of those two parties. So let's think about this, all of us as independents, that we have freedom of choice, and I encourage you to get the best information and act on it. Make that choice. Your vote is your choice. The other thing I heard is that there's a lot of technology challenges, whether it's express line voting, where we're scanning in data at the polls, or whether it's business services. we need to have someone who has that experience. And I will put my 5 years and many years before that, a total of about 10 years in information technology, 5 years with the state, against my opponent's records, which is each about, among many other things, I must note, among many other things, but 8 years in a legislative capacity. I've been in the trenches, I've talked to tens of thousands of businesses, and I heard the problems. When I sent it up to the commissioner 4 years ago, several times, the idea that we need to work with the Office of Secretary of State. We're getting a bunch of junk coming over, people are behind the times in terms of what they need to understand for this. Let's set up the one-stop shop. When they file their name, let's give them a tax ID. And those suggestions didn't go anywhere because the state government does move kind of slow. Elect Bob Helland, Bob for MNSOS, and the government will start moving faster. We'll be more responsive to your needs, and we're going to listen to everybody, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. Thanks for your time, and hope you had a good chance to learn a bit about all of us. I'll be outdoors afterwards.
You just gotta go over there. Yeah, it's pushing me. Mr. Stein.
I feel that.
Well, I too want to thank the Jefferson Center and MCTC for hosting this debate, but I want to add a couple other thank yous. I want to thank Dan Severson, and I want to thank Bob Helland, because though we may disagree on some issues, and we may clash on some issues, and we may have different perspectives, they are honorable people who are doing an honorable thing by running for office and putting themselves out there. So thanks to both of you. I'm honored to share this podium or this stage with you. I was in Rochester early this summer. I was there for a parade, Rochester Fest. I recommend it. And as I was getting ready for the parade, someone walked by with a t-shirt that caught my eye. She was not part of any political campaign as far as I know. She was just a citizen who was walking by the staging area. And she had a t-shirt. I'd never seen the saying on the t-shirt before. Haven't seen it since, I don't think. And it said something like this. It said, when you skip voting, it's not an act of rebellion. It's an act of surrender. I thought that was just great. Voting is always a choice, of course. But let's not, as a nation and as a state and as individuals, surrender that precious right which so many have fought and bled and died for. It's always a choice, of course. We don't have mandatory voting, but I think it's best when people have an easy path to voting, and that's what I'm dedicated towards. So as I said at the beginning, two main things. Number one, and most importantly, it's so important that the Secretary of State be a Secretary of State for all Minnesotans, even and especially those Minnesotans that might not agree with him or her, that might not have voted for them, might not ever even consider voting for them, but fundamentally believe that that person is fair. And two, someone who will always have in mind, day in and day out, protecting, defending, and yes, strengthening the right to vote. And as I said at the beginning, one of the reasons I'm so proud about the new law on the books to vote by mail and vote from home without an excuse is I think it fuses those two things. It was done on a bipartisan basis, and it really will open doors for a lot of people in Minnesota. And I think that's so, so important. There are still barriers out there. We got a good thing going in Minnesota. When we see fraud, we ought to attack it, we ought to punish it. And if it's out there, of course, we should never rest until any instances of irregularities get to zero. But we do have a good thing going in Minnesota. And we have the #1 turnout in the nation for a reason. One of those reasons, I have to believe, is that people ultimately do have trust and confidence that it's a fair system. They may not always agree with the outcomes. They may often disagree, but they think it's fair. And I want to be the person, with your help, with your blessing, with your support, and with your vote, who can help to administer and to run that system and make sure that we don't have people inadvertently or otherwise surrendering their own rights. The right to vote is precious. The right to vote is sacred. It shouldn't be messed with. Instead, it should be strengthened. That's what I want to do, always in a nonpartisan way, so that I, too, can be a Secretary of State for all Minnesotans. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Well, that concludes tonight's forum. I want to thank all the students that came out to participate and community members. You participated in an act of democracy. So we want to congratulate you all on being a part of this process. I want to thank the CDC Club for putting this forum together. Mike Jupiter, Lisa Owens, you didn't get a chance to speak, but we wish you could have. Lena Jones, Sarah Latisco, I always say her name wrong. Don't get that, Ashley. I always say everybody's last name wrong. But thank you to the Jefferson Center also for training me as a facilitator to handle tonight's forum. And thank you to the candidates very eloquently spoken tonight. I'm gonna bring Jay back up for closing remarks, and we'll be moving forward. Thanks, Jay.
Really quickly, coming from a person of color, Native American gentleman that didn't really believe in the system, thought it was set up against people of color, underrepresented people, I've really come to know that from my education at community colleges, tribal colleges, that power is in your vote. And you guys all have the power now to be more educated about our candidates, especially the Secretary of State, to get out there and make a change. If you don't vote, somebody else is not going to vote. And you really have the opportunity now to really speak your voice and really make a change in our communities. We're all counting on you, and your communities and your families are counting on you to make this change. And just one final note is how darn NCTC students can dress. So thank you all for coming out. It's been a pleasure.